Oh boy, this is going to be a can of worms. So, Summer Games Fest happened and a lot of stuff got revealed. However, one of the announcements that is taking the internet by storm in probably the funniest and most tone deaf way possible is the game called Relooted. It's a game, as you're seeing on screen here, where you play a bunch of black thieves breaking into Western museums, no, I'm not kidding, to steal African artifacts to return them to their owners. And as you'll see from all the articles and uncomfortable truths that I will show in this video, it genuinely seems like the industry wants this game to succeed to simply send a message. But the message being sent isn't really what people want, and that's putting it lightly. So, the concept of this game is hilarious from the get-go, and it was so on the nose, I actually thought it was a troll at first, but no, it's real. It's also being pushed by the Epic Games Store, and this game looks like it's about 5 years too late to be pandering something like this to players. There's also claims that the game pushes false concepts and that such a game is actually offensive towards black people as a whole. Yep, this video's gonna be a mess, isn't it? Well, let's dive into it, fellas. First of all, Engadget had their article titled "Rescue African Artifacts from Colonizers' Museums and the Heist Game Relooted." Semblance studio ENDYMIOnTv is back with puzzles, action, and a distinct story to tell. That's one way to put it. And oh boy, that's a headline alright. Hilariously written also by a white woman too. The virtue signaling is off the charts here. The game's story also gets a more in-depth description here, which also reads, Relooted is set in a future timeline where Western nations have signed a treaty to return plundered items to their African regions of origin, but things aren't going to plan. Western leaders are instead hiding the artifacts away in private collections, so it's up to a ragtag crew based in Johannesburg, South Africa, to strategize and steal them back. By the way, the plot of this game is actually completely false in terms of real-life things because Western nations are just giving back all of their artifacts, and it's, well, you'll see when I get into it later, but oh boy, this is, oh god, this is painfully oblivious. My god, dude, this can't be the real description for this game, can it? Okay, well, like I said, this video is going to be uncomfortable for everybody and a bit messy, so here we go. The game is about Western museums taking and hiding these artifacts from their populace. So, you mean like how African groups are doing right now in real life and not actually the Western ones? For an example, okay, credit where it's due, in 2024, the UK returned 32 gold and silver artifacts looted from the Asante Kingdom, which is now part of modern Ghana. These were stolen over 150 years ago, and you're seeing these artifacts on screen, and it was on loan from the British Museum and Victoria and Albert Museum, and these are displayed at the Mahia Palace Museum in Kumasi, Ghana right now. I hope I'm not butchering any of these names. If I am, I apologize. So anyway, these artifacts at least are currently being shown. We also have the French, who have returned 26 royal treasures looted in 1892 by French soldiers back to Benin in 2021. And they are now being exhibited in Cotonou. This was during the Dahomey Nation stuff. You know the movie The Woman King? You know, the movie title that makes literally no sense because she's not the king in the movie? Yeah, it's from there. Anyway, we also have the University of Cambridge, which returned 39 items to Uganda in 2024, including tribal regalia and pottery as part of a broader restitution movement as well. These are all well and good and usually what you would think would happen. Then you get to the Benin Bronzes, so little history here. Germany signed an agreement with Nigeria in 2022 to return over 1,100 metal plaques and sculptures that were looted from the Kingdom of Benin by British forces in 1897. Some have been repatriated to Nigeria, where they are intended for display in museums like the Edo Museum of Western African Art. However, many of these artifacts are currently under the custody of the Oba, that's the King of Benin, and Nigeria's National Commission for Museums and Monuments. This then brings up this article from the artnewspaper.com titled, Nigeria transfers ownership of Benin Bronzes to royal ruler, confusing European museums' plans to return artifacts. They then said, the Benin Bronzes restitution saga has taken a new turn after the Nigerian government has officially recognized the Oba of Benin, Oba Uwari II, as the owner and custodian of the artifacts looted in the late 19th century. The announcement came in the form of a presidential declaration released through the official gazette. The official notice, entitled Notice of Presidential Declaration on the Recognition of Ownership and an Order Vesting Custody and Management of Repatriated Looted Benin Artifacts in the Oba of Benin, was issued on the 23rd of March. They continue with this law as seen here, which also reads, all artifacts must be delivered to the King of Benin, who exercises the rights of original ownership. This covers the ones already repatriated and those yet to be repatriated. Again, allegedly the ruler there wants to put them in a museum or the royal palace. This has caused a lot of, criticism and whatnot. However, ever since these items were returned, the people of Nigeria have yet to be able to see these artifacts or even confirm if they are still in Nigeria at all. This was then clarified in 2025, and allegedly the king there that you're seeing on screen, who has been in control of these artifacts for a while now, has allegedly confirmed that he will allow these artifacts to be seen, and according to him, the reason why they weren't shown was due to a lack of infrastructure within Nigeria to properly house these artifacts, because there are reports of many museums having been damaged by termites and more. Obviously, that would put the artifacts at risk. As it said here, the OBA has given the National Commission for Museums and Monuments the blessing to display, conserve, and to pursue reparation, I keep messing that word up, of these objects, so there is no more ambiguity. Then Fenrir, who's a user on Twitter, would reply to Relooted with this about this take artifacts from museums and return them to their owners thing that was already done. And you know what happened. They were either destroyed or sold to private buyers by the African countries. This hating, treasure hunting, raising crap has to stop. It's dumb. And did they seriously think the only good representation for black characters is to have them steal stuff? So, this response to Relooted, it got a little heated, with a lot of black users specifically claiming that Fenrir here was all kinds of things that I can't say on YouTube. But as one user replied, "You're casting aside your blackness years ago. Don't speak now about this kind of stuff. You're effectively a confused white boy at this point." And then another user would say, "Shut up," and posted a raccoon dancing with a stick, which I think we can all know what that means. Of course, I don't really need to say it, but anyway, moving on. However, what Fenrir said was not entirely incorrect. Okay, sure, the Nigerian artifacts are allegedly going to be housed and shown off eventually if that king guy stays true to his word. However, in Sudan, for example, which has been in a civil war for the past 2 years, as seen here, from prized artworks to bullet shells, how war devastated Sudan's museums. So, in Sudan right now, the Sudanese military is currently fighting the RSF, or Rapid Support Forces, which are trying to wrestle control of Sudan away from the government. Things like offices, banks, and entire government buildings have actually already been ransacked, destroyed, and looted during all of this. Then the BBC, which reported on this, then said this, which reads here, senior officials say tens of thousands of artifacts were either destroyed or shipped off to be sold during the time the RSF was in control of central Khartoum, where the museum is situated. As one of the officials confirms and says here, they destroyed our identity and our history. So, in Sudan at least, tens of thousands of artifacts from African descent were either destroyed by this Rapid Support Forces group, which again is an insurgency group in a civil war with Sudan's government right now. That's real. Go look it up if you want. But it is confirmed 100% that yes, African militants did destroy and sell tens of thousands of artifacts that were, repatriated from these Western museums to either, intimidate the Sudani government. But if I had to guess, the actual true reason why these artifacts were sold in the first place was because the RSF, let's be real, they needed the funds to keep maintaining their war effort and their supplies against the Sudanese government. Therefore, they sold off their own history and people's ancestry for literal ammunition, and God knows what else they used it on. I have no idea. So, when people say Relooted as a game is somewhat tone-deaf in its approach, it's half and half. I gotta give credit to both sides. They are right to a degree. I mean, Fenrir and, those people, for example, but there are official reports that many artifacts have not been sold in other parts of Africa. So nobody is technically wrong in this argument, is what I'm trying to say, since both sides have things that support what they say officially. By the way, here's that Sudanese museum that's prior to the Civil War, as you're seeing on screen. It's very nice and beautiful and well kept. And here it is now. As you can see, it's destroyed, it's desecrated, and completely stripped for parts by those insurgents. And as the museum staff said in that same article, the militia, the description the Sudanese officials gave to the RSF, took so many of the unique and beautiful collections and destroyed and damaged the rest. They also claim that there are literal bullet holes in many of the things that are still in that museum, so they literally just destroyed everything and sold off the rest. So this claim that nowhere in Africa are they destroying or selling artifacts, that is officially a lie, unfortunately. And the article also explains that the Sudanese government is currently blaming actually the Arab, countries like Saudi Arabia as being the ones who are financing the RSF military themselves, and that they have, in secret, taken many of these African artifacts in exchange for money. According to Sudan, the RSF has even sold gold since before that civil war even broke out to Saudi Arabia too, meaning that they had this connection, prior to the civil war even happening. So what does it have to do with Reloaded as a game, I hear you asking? Look, the point is that the game is, let's just say it, is kind of propaganda, for lack of a better word, if I'm going to be honest. As GameSpot said it here, Reloaded is like a reverse Indiana Jones, and oh boy, that does not sound fun at all, but that is definitely one way to put it. Apparently, the whole game is this. It's split into basically 3 phases. Phase 1, you scope the museum out. Phase 2, you set up an escape route and path, to get to the thing you're trying to steal. And then Phase 3, you execute the plan. You steal the artifact, and then you use Phase 2's escape route to get out safely, of course. And then the artifacts are also, in case you don't know, real and are currently in museums, meaning that you're stealing actual artifacts as seen here on screen, which I guess that's cool. However, you wrote an entire story saying that Western museums are specifically not giving the artifacts back to these African countries, which is absolutely not true at all. And basically what the plot of this game is trying to say is that white countries are, I guess, evil and awful, and they don't respect African culture, which is totally not true at all. That might have been true back in the day, but now that's just not the case at all. So when I say this game's story is propaganda, they're literally taking something that is real and they're twisting it in a way to still make themselves the victims, if you will, and make the white people in this story seem like they're evil, even though they're the ones that are actually giving you back your artifacts. And in reality, it's African militant groups that are the ones that are actually destroying and, selling off these things for money and other things. So again, it's propaganda. It just is. It is what it is. However, I still don't think making a game where a group of black thieves are looting is exactly the best look, if I'm being honest. As this user said, make black people game, it's about stealing. Oh my god, yeah, it's not a good look, no matter how you splice it up. Even Permaband commented and said, Epic Games advertises an anti-racist game that supposedly promotes African culture. It's a game about theft, robbery, and looting called Relooted. Again, who needs racists with allies like these? This is legitimately insulting the culture they claim to promote. And they're kind of right. Who does need racists in the real world when the allies of these so-called anti-racist groups are in fact far more racist than any racist could be? Again, they rewrote the story against reality, otherwise the game couldn't even exist. So my question is, why does New Age games, especially, feel the need to push black characters as well in the same roles pretty much all of the time? Because there tends to be this constant need that if you have a black character in a role in a modern video game, that it has to, in some way, be directly tied to African culture and always fighting the white man specifically, almost always. Like, I know you've been seeing on screen, right? I've been showing Avengers Black Panther footage in this video because honestly, there isn't really enough relooted footage to fill a whole video. So I figured, why don't I just pander a little bit too like this industry's doing? So I just put some black characters on gameplay. There's your representation, guys. Am I pandering a little bit? Absolutely. But it's almost as if whether it's Relooted or Black Panther or Dustborn even and more, if a black main character exists in a game, They have to always these days be either fighting the white man or have some victimhood complex 24/7. Like, I think the only time that I can think of, on top of my head anyways, where a black protagonist was not the victim and the game wasn't about, stealing back their culture or sticking it to people like Trump or something is maybe Prototype 2. It's just frankly getting boring, in my opinion, to just see the same concept in a game being made over and over again. Why can't black characters in games stealing and looting all the time? Isn't this the epitome of a harmful stereotype and exactly what the games industry and journalists always frown upon? Yet it seems like to me that the entire industry with their articles are instead praising this game. Oh my god, they love it so much. They want this game to succeed, even though, let's be real, it probably won't. At best, Relooted will just become the next game that people will make videos on or streams to make fun of. Kind of in the same way that they did with Dustborn or Forspoken before it, and that's not because the characters are black, mind you, but because for some reason, game developers have this weird need where if the characters are black, they have to be subjugated. They always have to be undermined by society and, ridiculed, and they always, always, always have to have victim mindsets all the time, dude. It's so tiring. Because they can't seem to be anything except the very stereotypes that cling to their identity. And the fact that these game developers unironically went, you know what? Let's make a game where black people loot into a reality is actually insane, if you ask me. Like, why are Hollywood and even gaming journals really totally fine with reducing the black archetype and its people to just forever exist and operate within these very small boxes, doing the same things over and over again? Like, you couldn't make a cool black superhero game in the style of maybe Infamous. You couldn't make a JRPG, inspired turn-based game in a fantasy world with a black protagonist. No. Your first and best idea was, hey, let's make a team of black people who steal from white people into a game in 2025. Are you serious right now? Look, I get it. The industry wants to double down on the pandering even in the face of rejection from literally everyone, but what Relooted is doing is not only out of touch both historically and socially, but it's just a tired concept that people don't want. Nobody's keeping these artifacts. They're giving it back to the African people. The only people selling them are the African militants. What are we doing? I can't imagine anyone will play this game except maybe people that want to make fun of it at best, and rightfully so, or the very few streamers who get paid to stream it for like a day until they uninstall it and never play it again. And I can already bet that the reviews will be great too, but this will mostly be simply because reviewers would never dare low score a game like with such social clout like this one. You know that any white reviewer who ends up being the ones to score Relooted will get flayed alive by their leftist echo chambers if they give this anything below a 7 maybe, or they will just be called racist and thrown into the streets. Look, even ENDYMIOntv CEO, which is making Relooted, his name is Brian Myers, by the way. And also, the only other game that they have made is Semblance, which you're seeing on screen here. I'm going to be honest, I've never heard of this game before either. And if you go look it up on Steam, literally nobody is playing it. Like, it's actually at 0. I'm not even kidding. But anyway, Insider Gaming interviewed Brian Myers of ENDYMIOntv about Relooted, and here's what he said about the game. When we first started working on this concept in late 2018, 7 years ago, Jesus, it was never the intention to make a game of this scale and production value. Yet the concept always feels like it deserved a certain level of effort and budget. It's a game and story begging to be told, okay, and we just wanted to make sure it was told in the most high quality and broadly appealing way possible. He continues, we've sort of made several games while making this game. There are smaller scoped prototypes, completely different genres, and more toned down narrative, visuals, and animation scoped versions of the game. But over time, it just felt like trying to make the story and art to the level we've made it was important as part of the broader importance of the game. Broader importance, yes, okay, so it's definitely a game about politics and social impact then, isn't it? This game will 100% be nominated for Games for Impact at the Game Awards. I bet money on that, dude. By the way, that's an award given to games that pandered the hardest, so games journalists and industry types don't feel racist about it. But anyway, Brian Myers said more, which reads, the full-time team of Semblance only peaked at 3. The full credits of Relooted will be much longer than the 30 full-time peak we reached 2. The challenges have been constant and evolving on the project. It's likely the single biggest game project ever made in sub-Saharan Africa by budget, team size, and scope. Moreover, it's made in an engine no one on the team knew well, Unreal Engine, by a team filled with folks who hadn't shipped a game before, at least in their role. making an experimental game artistically imagining future Africa, mechanically non-violent heist, narratively adapting heist stories to games, and musically a futurist sound with traditional African instruments. They say later on in the interview too that the core reason as to why they made this was to inform players of the stolen artifacts. Saying that, oh, these Western museums are keeping all these artifacts, which they're not, by the way, they're giving it back, but okay, I guess you need to make your game exist, so you gotta justify it somehow, I guess. But I don't think what this game is going for is going to go over well for most players. I mean, this seems like the kind of game that will only appeal to the specific types, and you know the types, and the mass appeal wise, I just don't personally see this doing very well. Plus the fact that everyone in game looks like they're just extras from Black Panther doesn't really help either. Look, I get it, they want to make an African game, but you could have maybe not played into stereotypes or pandering like this. This would just be as racist, unironically, as any other group of people making a game based on their culture and then tying it to their stereotypes. Here's a German game where you know what happens. Look, I'm all for teams across the world making games. I think that's what gives games unique identities in the first place. Go look at how Slavic people have made games like Tainted Grail or Witcher, for example, for what I mean. But I think this game is not what players really want right now, and the response to its announcement, I think it speaks volumes. Again, it doesn't help that this game exists when a literal civil war is raging in Sudan where they sold off tens of thousands of artifacts for ammo and who knows what else. Like, it's just not a good look, but like I said in the first place, if you just read the articles on this, you can tell that the industry, they really want this game to succeed. Even though they know deep down in their nuts down that this game's existence is the exact opposite of what many, many players want these days. So, whenever Relooted comes out, I am sure we're gonna hear more, and I'm sure the journalists and stuff will pander to it like crazy, dude. But this, alongside other games featured recently, I have literally no idea who these games are being made for. And they seem more like they're being made as propaganda first and video games second. Gee, I wonder where we've heard that kind of thing before. And I thought we were maybe, past this whole thing with the whole sweet baby stuff, but I guess time really is a flat circle, isn't it? Well, that's what I got for you today. What do you think of Relooted? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Subscribe. Have a great day. My God, this game really exists. And I will see you guys in the next one.